Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7. My name is Gordon Ross, and the headlines today. In Westminster today, the UK government has been defeated in an amendment aimed at blocking the proroguing of Parliament by Boris Johnson. The SNP-backed amendment to block a no-deal Brexit plot to shut down the Parliament. The MPs have backed a bid to stop the new Prime Minister suspending Parliament to force through a no-deal Brexit. 4 Cabinet Ministers who abstained are International Development Secretary Rory Stewart, Business Secretary Greg Clark and Justice Secretary David Gauke, as well as the Chancellor Philip Hammond. 17 Tories rebelled against the party whip to vote against their own government today. The Minister, Margot James, abstained and has since resigned. Margot James becomes the 37th Minister to resign under Theresa May's government. The bill will now return to the Lords for further consideration. Now, in response to this today, there have been statements made by. Okay. We have also had statements from Ian Blackford, the leader of the SNP group in Westminster today, and he has said that the SNP has said it will vote the amendment to stop Boris Johnson shutting down the Parliament and forcing through a devastating no-deal Brexit. Commenting, Mr Blackford MP said, Boris Johnson must be stopped. It would be a democratic outrage for a Tory Prime Minister to bypass the UK and Scottish Parliaments. Crashing out of the EU without any deal at all could cause a recession, destroy 100,000 Scottish jobs and cost every person in the country over £2,300 a year. He went on, and yet again, Scotland is being ignored and our interests sidelined. Any form of Brexit would be a disaster. With Scottish jobs, living standards, public services and the economy all under threat. And it's no wonder that support for independence is growing in Scotland and a majority now supports a fresh referendum. Any pretence that Scotland will ever be treated as an equal partner in the UK has now gone. It has become clearer than ever that the only way to properly protect Scotland's interests is by becoming an equal and independent European country. Now, there are further warnings today from the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, the OBR, which is the watchdog organisation set up independently of Parliament by the Conservative government. Now, the OBR, its main remit is to warn government and to guide government in terms of economic problems. And in this case, the OBR is warning that the UK, if there is a no-deal Brexit, will slide into a deep recession. Already the United Kingdom's economy is teetering on the brink just now, and any further talk even of a no-deal Brexit appears to be pushing it ever closer towards a recession. Now, there have been other comments today in response to this. I'll just find these for you. Here is a little bit more detail for you. So according to the OBR, first of all, Britain might be entering a full-blown recession, and a no-deal Brexit could more than double the country's budget deficit within a year, the watchdog for public finances has said today. The Office for Budget Responsibility said the world's 5th biggest economy appears to have flatlined and possibly contracted in the second quarter, some of which was probably payback for Brexit-related stock, which had been built up in early 2019, just before the first date, the 29th of March, had passed for Brexit. But surveys were particularly weak in June, suggesting that the pace of growth is likely to remain weak. This raises the risk that the economy may be entering a full-blown recession, it said in a report on the outlook for public finances. A no-deal Brexit would hurt confidence and deter investment and lead to higher trade barriers with the European Union, pushing down the value of the pound and causing the economy to contract by 2% by the end of 2020, the OBR said, referring to forecasts by the International Monetary Fund. A no-deal Brexit, something that the two contenders seeking to be Britain's next Prime Minister say they are prepared to do if necessary, could add £30 billion a year to public borrowing by the 2020-21 financial year, the OBR said. The Office for Budgetary Responsibility also said that the spending and tax cut promises made by Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt, one of whom is due to become the Prime Minister next week, would put a great strain on the budget. The spending control framework seems to be under pressure, with major announcements being made outside of fiscal events, said the Conservative leadership, making pledges that would prove expensive if they were pursued, it said. Now, in response to this, we have a response from the SNP to the news today from the OBR. And this is from the Scottish Government. Commenting on the warning from the OBR that a no-deal UK exit could mean a UK recession, the Finance Secretary of the Scottish Government, Derek Mackay, said, "The Office for Budget Responsibility confirms what the Scottish Government have been warning about for months, that a no-deal Brexit has the potential to push the economy into recession, damaging business investment and household incomes. It must be ruled out immediately." The Scottish Government has been clear and consistent that the best option for the future well-being and prosperity of Scotland is to stay in the European Union. Otherwise, we will see damage to our economy and the future prospects of the people of Scotland suffering. As a responsible government, we are continuing to plan and prepare for all EU exit possibilities. But we know that we will not be able to mitigate all of the impacts. The Scottish Government has a range of policies in place to support business and inclusive economic growth, and the Scottish economy is strong. We will continue to work with business to do what we can to mitigate yet further uncertainty over the UK's EU exit. So that from the Scottish Government today. Now, moving on now to another story. And this time we are looking at Scottish income tax revenues. Figures published today, statistics in fact show that tax choices in Scotland are delivering a more progressive tax system. The headline figure shows that Scottish income tax revenues have grown 1.6% in 2017 to 2018. The official statistics published by the HMRC show that the income tax revenues grew by 1.8% to £10.9 billion in the 2017-18 tax year, with growth driven primarily by an increase in contributions from higher and additional rate taxpayers. Those earning above £43,000 in Scotland in 2017-18. Now, the figures also showed that growth in tax paid by additional rate taxpayers was faster in Scotland compared to the rest of the United Kingdom, 8.5% compared to 8% in the rest of the UK. The provisional estimate for Scottish income tax revenue for 2018-19 is £11.7 billion, a 7% increase on the previous year. PAYE receipts have grown faster in Scotland in 2018-19 at 5.9% compared to the rest of the UK at just 5.1%. So we can see a trend developing here since Scotland has developed its own income taxpayers and is beginning to use them, that taxes raised in Scotland now are increasing, giving the government more money to put into valuable public services. Okay, so also this has a bearing on the way the fiscal settlement for Scotland will appear in future years. After revisions to income tax revenues and the associated block grant adjustment, there will be a final reconciliation figure of £204 million, a reduction on the amount projected in the medium-term financial strategy. The latest forecast report by the Scottish Fiscal Commission notes that, give me just a second, that the reconciliations will result from different forecasting methodologies. So the way in which the figures are compiled produces slightly different results north of the border. But they also say that a run of negative reconciliation should not be unexpected, and we may see extended periods of positive reconciliations in the future. That means more money coming into the Scottish Block Grant. Now, responding to these figures, the Finance Secretary for the Scottish Government, Derek Mackay, has said these statistics show that the Scottish Government's choice on taxation is helping to create a more progressive tax system, and at the same time is growing our economy with low unemployment. Between 2016 and 17 and 2017 and 18, Scottish income tax revenue increased by £197 million, a growth of 1.8%, while the number of Scottish higher and additional rate taxpayers combined and the revenue paid by them grew more quickly in Scotland than it did in the rest of the UK. Now, these figures demonstrate that concerns that taxpayers could relocate as a result of our new tax choices were in fact unfounded. While we support changes to the personal allowance, it has reduced the number of basic rate taxpayers in Scotland by a greater degree than across the rest of the UK. So taking more lower paid workers out of taxation than is the case south of the border. So he goes on to say, I remain of the view that it would be beneficial to the people of Scotland if we had full control of all aspects of the income tax system. We now know that the reconciliation amount that will apply to the coming budget, but the 2018-90 reconciliation will only be confirmed with the autumn figures published next year. However, the PAYE receipts data published today shows stronger growth for Scotland than the rest of the UK. Which will have a positive impact on the size of next year's reconciliation. This is the amount of money flowing from the Treasury in Westminster into the Scottish Government. Whilst these figures show our reserves and borrowing capacity are sufficient to manage the 2018 reconciliation, I will make a decision as part of the budget and spending review process on how to manage any reconciliation in a fiscally responsible way that supports our vital public services. However, the volatility of the current system places on Scotland's spending means the fiscal framework review must consider the current limits of the use of the reserve and the borrowing powers that we clearly have shown are not fit for purpose. So hence here coming from the Finance Secretary for the Scottish Government that the system isn't perfect, but it is improving things for the Scottish taxpayer and also for the Scottish Government in terms of the amount of tax money that it can now make available to public services. So moving on to our next story this evening, and we're looking at a story regarding the building of new hospitals. You may recall in recent months in other media the reports on the ventilation system at the Queen Elizabeth University's University's Hospital in Govan, where 2 patients were infected with a disease which showed connections to bird faeces. Now, the connection to the bird faeces was never really proved, and the actual the vector, the route by which these infections got into the hospital is not understood. However, it did provoke a thorough, deep clean of the building and a complete revision and a review of all the ventilation systems in the new hospital. Now this has actually had a knock-on effect in another hospital in Scotland, and this one is the Royal Hospital for Children and Young People, another new build, I understand. And further steps are to be taken to ensure parent safety here as well. The ventilation system is to be checked after the scare at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And NHS National Services Scotland will undertake a detailed assessment of the compliance of all the building systems that could impact on the safety of patients and staff at the new site. This will be phased with an assessment of water, ventilation, drainage and other systems prioritised, including the proposed fix for the ventilation unit. This will determine the time frame for services moving to the new hospital, and a full report is anticipated in December. Now, obviously, this kind of safety procedure, now that it's been put in place, will delay the opening of the hospital. But in order to safeguard the safety of both the patients and the staff in the new hospital, it's obvious that these new checks have to be carried out, and the hospital authorities have to be satisfied that there is no way that such an infection can pass through the ventilation system in any other hospital. Now, the NSS will also review current and recently completed major NHS capital projects, take that to mean new buildings, and to provide assurances that the same standards have been complied with in those. To establish the factors that led to the delay, the company KPMG, which is performing the review, began an independent review of the governance arrangements for the Royal Hospital for Children and Young People on Monday, the 15th of July. And in addition, the Health Secretary has escalated NHS Lothian to level 3 of the NHS Board Performance Escalation Framework. Now, this will be a mechanism under which the actions taken to remediate these problems, to fix these problems, is speeded up and will be fitting into some kind of framework which the local authorities have put in place to ensure the work is carried out across the board. A package of tailored support will be made available to the Health Board to drive forward the improvements. Now, the Health Secretary, Jane Freeman, said, "I understand that this is a disappointing and worrying time for parents and carers of patients who have appointments in the new Children's Hospital. However, safe, effective and high quality clinical services continue to be delivered from the existing site at Sciennes." I hope I pronounced that correctly. Sheens, I beg your pardon, I've just been corrected. Okay. Okay, so moving on to international news now. We're looking at a story concerning American President Donald Trump. Now, okay, so Donald Trump has got himself into trouble again somehow or other. In a recent spat, Donald Trump was criticizing 4 liberal congresswomen, all women of color, that Trump had criticized as un-American, and saying that they were welcome to leave the country if they didn't like his policies on issues such as immigration and defending Israel. Trump tweeted over the weekend that the 4 progressive representatives known as the Squad, Omar of Minnesota, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts should, and in quote marks, go back where they came from, even though all of them are US citizens and 3 of them were born in the United States. Now, Trump paused. The House of Representatives yesterday put forward a motion of censure, and it was passed. And it's been noted that during his recent speech, Donald Trump paused for 11 seconds when chants erupted after he recounted the comments of Omar, who was born in Somalia, and chants of send her back were made for 11 seconds. Since then, Donald Trump has tried to distance himself from his original comments and from responsibility for pausing for 11 seconds to allow the send her back chants, the racist chanting, to go on. And this has drawn criticism from all corners of the political world in the last few days. So Donald Trump again getting himself into trouble, and not the only man, it seems, getting himself into trouble. Ironically, I'm just hearing, ironically, despite Donald Trump drawing the attention and the criticism of the world's media and other politicians, his popularity ratings amongst his own support have actually gone up since this event. So this racism row appears to be increasing Trump's popularity in America rather than decreasing it. Something which must be worrying many people in the United States at this moment. Now, on this side of the channel, we have our own strange politicians, and no stranger, it seems, than Boris Johnson, who this week was waving a kipper around at a hustings event, and he was complaining apparently about the fact that people who are ordering kippers are required to have some kind of anyone who's selling these kippers is required to place a gel pack inside the mail order package before they're sent off. Now, this is a frozen gel pack. It's designed to keep the produce fresh while it is in transit to the purchaser. And they're not particularly effective. I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, they are highly effective at keeping the kippers fresh. However, Boris Johnson seemed to have been under the impression that it was the European Union that had insisted that these things were put into the packaging, when in fact this is actually a British rule that was in place for all mail order foodstuffs of this kind. So the British Food Standards Agency is actually the people to blame for this, and not the European Union. And of course, in Scotland, the Food Standards Agency is a devolved matter, so whatever Boris Johnson is saying in England will not apply here. However, that's a even. Forgive me, hang on. So it seems that despite anything that you order via mail order, particularly if it's food, perishable goods of any kind, particularly foodstuffs ordered, even in sealed packs to be sent through the post, have to have this frozen gel pack in order to keep the product cold enough to make it through the post or to make it across the road. Otherwise, as somebody was pointing out to me recently, without these packages, the food will go off and is likely to cause the customer to become ill or kill them. So I think Boris Johnson really has made a bit of a mistake here. He's trying to say that this is yet more unnecessary health and safety and red tape from the European Union, when in actual fact it's his own Department of Food Safety which is insisting upon this. Anyway, that is about it from Scotland at 7 this evening. I'll return next week, where I'll be presenting the show again next Thursday. Okay. In a live programme like this, we're constantly being bombarded with extra news to try and cram in. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, unfortunately. So for this edition of Scotland at 7, I'll see you next week, and look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Bye-bye for now.